Thank you, Christine. It's an honor to be here. I think the last time I was in this room was maybe senior week. Don't really remember that much stuff. You know, when Christine and Melanie asked me to do this a few weeks ago, I was a little hesitant. You see, I'm at a transition point in my life. I went from a biology major here with dreams of becoming a veterinarian to a really stable career in social media marketing and community outreach, as Christine mentioned. But somehow I found myself right back in medicine. I left the comfort and security of my job and completed a post-bac pre-med program at the University of Hartford, and I'm studying for the MCAT full time. I'm honestly losing my marbles on a daily basis. And I asked myself, what little pearls of knowledge, what stories can I dig up for con students that really exemplifies the modern native? I found my answer last week. I was on vacation in Quintana Roo, Mexico a little over a week ago. We toured the ruined city of Cova, where, Mayan villages and ancient temples still exist. The trip was during the very end of a drawn-out rainy season, but we opted for the adventure route despite the daily downpours. We biked through the jungle and climbed Nohachimul, the largest Mayan temple in the Yucatan Peninsula. About 40 meters up, all you could see is this thick carpet of green stretching through the horizon and tufts of fog going through the trees. It was honestly one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And to top it off, we became friendly with a pair of newlyweds from Georgia. We'll call them Frank and Darcy. We shared a lot of laughs and realized that they had roots back in Connecticut. It was all so surreal, almost too perfect. Frank seemed very interested in Mayan history, if not a little bit of a show-off in his knowledge, but I guess that's understandable. After the ruins, we joined Frank and Darcy for a traditional Mayan pottery making class in a nearby village. We struck up a conversation about Connecticut casinos and how I pretty much suck at strategy games. Frank commiserated and added, yeah, the last time I was in Connecticut, I lost a lot of money at insert casino name here. I wish I could tell those Indian kids, I hope you're happy with the money I gave you for your education. He scoffed and said, those Indian kids, man. Now, my hands were covered in this stinky, sticky, sulfuric clay. My legs were throbbing from mosquito bites. I was exhausted. But in that instant, it felt like a lightning bolt jolted me awake. I was so caught off guard. Now, back in the day, maybe back in high school, I might have had some words for Frank. I might have been aggressive, sarcastic, defensive. I laughed it off and said something to the effect of, Frank, I assure you that many natives, including myself, aren't looking for charity, aren't benefiting from casino money, and are indeed educated. I explained where my tribe was located and how we struggle, and Frank fell silent. My goal wasn't to shut him up or make him feel stupid. With the knowledge, tolerance, patience, and understanding I've acquired from places like, well, here at Connecticut College, my way of thinking has evolved. I can change people's minds and approach ignorance as an opportunity to teach. On that trip, I realized how little I knew of Mayan history and, unfortunately, how much popular culture had shaped my perspective. Popularized Mayan culture often depicts a very violent and savage civilization. However, the downfall of the Mayan Empire was, in many ways, very similar to Native Americans. Their land was seized, their culture stripped, and their traditions lost. Spain integrated Mexico like modern America is still fairly young, only a few hundred years old. The Mexican government is now pushing to preserve Mayan culture, arts and skills, and their ancient language. We're talking back to like 2000 BC. It's funny how fairly innocent preconceptions work. Just about 2 years ago, I had the privilege of speaking to a group of really bright and curious students at a private high school in Connecticut about my tribe. They asked me questions like, does it make you angry that kids like want iPads and stuff? And how hard is it growing up without this and this? And of course I had to answer, well, I want an iPad and stuff. And although my parents were a little nutty, I had a pretty great childhood. I realized that their ideas of native life might have been formed by popular culture or more likely ancient history. They assumed that I was living exactly as my ancestors did, which is understandable. But they gave me a great opportunity to tell them about my tribe, just as Melanie and Christine have asked me to tell you a little bit about us. I was crowned princess of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation for the first time in 2003 and then again a few years later. Part of the requirements for being a tribal princess entailed learning our tribe's history. If and when I do mention my tribal affiliation, a vast majority of people automatically reference casinos and money, but the Eastern Pequot history runs much deeper than slot machines and crap tables. I'll give you the abridged version of what was presented here today. The Pequot Mohegans were an ancient nomadic tribe led by Sachems and Sagamores, aka chiefs. They were already established in what is now known as Connecticut and Rhode Island well before colonization of North America. The area was rich in what European colonists considered highly desirable resources which, as you know, set the stage for competition and eventually a series of wars and massacres during the early to mid-1600s. This forced women and children into slavery, killed off whole families, and fragmented a once large and peaceful tribe. The Eastern Pequots arose from the ashes when a small group of survivors migrated to North Stonington, settling in the same place our reservation sits today. The reservation was officially deeded to our tribe in 1683 by King Philip and remains the oldest continuously occupied reservation in this country. The second time I received the honor of Eastern Pequot Princess, I began to realize how lucky I was to continue this legacy, to tell this story. It was also around that time that my tribe lost their federal recognition. Federal recognition, the state of being legally recognized by the United States Bureau of Indian Affairs and the U.S. Department of the Interior. So, what kind of things does a federally recognized tribe benefit from? It allows natives to become eligible for federal assistance in areas like health, education, and housing. Federal recognition is not a euphemism for casino. Our tribe first began petitioning for recognition in the 1970s, just about 200 years after we settled in North Stonington. Think about that for a second. Despite centuries of genealogy and tradition, in the eyes of the federal government, we're virtually invisible. That's pretty wild. That petition was considered in the late 1990s and received 2 preliminary positives by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, decisions that, up until that point, have never been reversed. It was then revoked in 2005 under grounds that have been studied, debated, dissected. In short, the decision was based not on approving native life through government-assisted healthcare, a hot topic at this point right now, and the ability to educate our youth, but opposition to the idea of additional casinos in the state of Connecticut. Our recognition, or lack thereof, hinged on, at least in my opinion, personal interests. We're still searching for justice, acknowledgement, and the right to sovereignty to this day. Us natives, many of us, including myself, who have descended not only from the roots of this country, but from immigrants from many countries across the pond, strive to lead by example. To make people like Frank and the young eager minds of those kids see what being native really means. I personally wasn't always that way though. I admit that my first 2 years or so at Con were tough because I was so terribly shy. Not that Con didn't offer everything I needed in the way of making friends. You see, I am an African American, Italian American, Native American only child, and the planned product of 2 loving gay women who've been together for over 30 years. They just earned the right to marry only a few years ago and finally did. As you can imagine, this type of family structure was beyond taboo when I was born. I wasn't what you'd call the norm back then, and I've never blamed my parents for protecting me from a world that wasn't accepting of alternative families. When I got here, I'd never been out of the country or tried exotic foods or danced out in the open to music I was unfamiliar with. But here I experienced acceptance. Here I realized how unique I was. Here I stopped being apprehensive. I did all those things here. I had a lot of firsts at Con. I felt free to tell people about my upbringing and was surprised that I was met with open-minded curiosity. I traveled out of the country for the first time to Belize with my tropical bio class, scaled the side of a mountain on a metal rope, and slept next to a rainforest. I hope they still have that here. I found a love for jam music in the bar next to Crow and danced without judgment. I loved and lost here, and more importantly, I learned to teach. You guys are so lucky to be here. If there's one thing that you take away from my senseless ramblings, take ignorance as an opportunity to teach, as an opportunity to change someone's mind. Everyone has their own roots, their own struggles, their own histories. So as you teach, learn. Thank you.